Hello, and this will be about Chapter 5 Study Guide. We'll be taking our test soon, so definitely take a look at this. This is in your workbook, Reproducible 105. I don't know the page, but it's after, it's at the end of the chapter. Um, as usual, it's an excellent study guide, and it'll break down everything that you need to know for your test. So the first thing is, as Great Britain expanded control of the American colonies, many colonists became dissatisfied and rebellious. Great Britain's reasons for controlling the colonies were, remember back in chapter 3, they wanted to be a world power, gold, God, and glory. Glory still around. And in the American colonies, Great Britain's desire to remain a world power resulted in conflict with the French, known as the French and Indian War. Great Britain imposed taxes such as the Stamp Act to raise necessary revenue to pay for the costs of the French and Indian War. This becomes more clear when we start talking about the reasons for taxation. So they wanted to control the colonies. This was about power, about becoming a stronger empire. More possessions you have, the more land you have, the more colonists and bigger your empire, the stronger you're going to be. You get more and more money, which means you can make a bigger military. Part of Great Britain's effort to control the colonies meant taxing the colonists. So it was to help finance the French and Indian War and maintenance of British troops in the colonies. So when we look at the war before, this was all French, and this was the British part. And then after the war, we see that all this French area is now British. Even the Spanish area down here becomes British, which means that they're going to have to put more troops in these areas to protect first of all, their colonists and then their interests in in these areas. So they put troops all throughout here. Um, so that is something that they have to be aware of when they're going and after the war, the French and Indian War. Yes, they needed money to fight the war, but also after the war, they have to maintain those troops and they have to stay there. So, of course, this is taxation without representation, something that we know very well. And the reason why, and this is very important, here we have the reasons why the colonists were angry. Of course, they didn't have representation in Parliament, which was not a big deal until they got the taxes, which is right over here. They opposed the British taxes. Some colonists resented the power of the colonial governors. Remember, we talked about this in Chapter 4, where the governors had almost total power. I mean, they can knock down any law that the legislature puts up. They're in charge of the local militia, and so they were. It was an unchecked power, and the person that was the governor was somebody that was appointed by the king. So the colonists started to realize this is a problem and that their power was much less than they thought it was. Great Britain wanted strict control over the colonial legislatures. So whatever power the colonies did have, as we see throughout the chapter, as we saw throughout the chapter, that he would shut down legislatures or restrict them because they were not doing what or not being on the king's side. So they became more and more um, worried about what the colonial legislatures wanted to do and what they were going to gin up. And then, of course, the Proclamation of 1763, if we look at our map again over here, we see that, oops, excuse me, let me get this back. All right, so this area right over here was places that the British fought for, and the colonists wanted to move into it. And the Proclamation of 1763 said that they can't move out of this dark red area. They can't move into the pink area. And that made the colonists very, very angry. So that was the Proclamation of 1763. All right, so new ideas about government led to a desire for independence. We became more focused on what we wanted to do here in America. The colonists wanted a government where they were fairly represented. This led to the Declaration of Independence. Okay, and Declaration of Independence had these four key ideas. This is another thing that we really need to focus on right here. People have certain unalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away, like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's number one. Okay, so everybody has these rights. They have a right to live, they have a right to be free, They have a right to pursue their own happiness, not necessarily get to happiness, but at least pursue it. They get to they can try. And then people establish a government to protect these rights, these life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. The government is there to protect those rights. That's their purpose. And that whatever power the government gets comes from the people. Government derives power from the people. It means they get power from the people. And then finally, people have a right and a duty to change a government, right here, change a government that violates their rights. So if a government goes around killing people, indiscriminately, try to intimidate them, take away their freedom, uh, stop them from pursuing their life goals and dreams, then they have a right and a duty to change that government. All right, so now these are the important people. Make sure you know that. That's pretty big. Then we have our famous people of the Revolutionary War. King George, it's pretty easy. He was the king of Britain at the time. And we have Lord Cornwallis. He was the general that surrendered at Yorktown. John Adams was a powerful voice for the independence. He was, remember, nominating people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson to lead the army and write the Declaration of Independence. So we got George Washington was commander of the Continental Army. One thing to note is that he was a representative of Virginia. John Adams was a representative of Massachusetts, and Thomas Jefferson was also from Virginia. Remember we talked about how important Virginia was to bring into the Revolution, and so John Adams knew this, and Massachusetts was massively involved. He wanted Virginia in, so he got these two involved. One, being commander, and the other a major author of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense down here. Promoted American independence. Was very much in favor of the American independence cause. Got Paul Revere. Remember, he made the daring ride to warn colonists. I think as British coming, actually it was probably regulars are coming or redcoats are coming, is what he would yell to people. And he also was involved in the Boston Tea Party with Samuel Adams, who was a cousin of John Adams. Okay. Then we have Benjamin Franklin, prominent member of the Continental Congress, helped frame the Declaration of Independence, helped gain French support of American independence. And that is a big thing because remember after Saratoga, he was the one that got that treaty with the French that helped us win the war. Phyllis Wheatley, we didn't get to spend a lot of time in her in class. She was enslaved African American and became free, and she wrote poems and plays supporting the American independence. And like I said, she eventually gained her freedom. Patrick Henry was an outspoken member. You remember your speech that you memorized in fourth grade, "Give me liberty or give me death" speech. And then Marquis de Lafayette, French nobleman, young French nobleman, was very supportive of the American Revolution and contributed to the victory at Yorktown. He was with Washington for most of the time that the French and the Americans were together. Okay, and then we have our timeline here. I think you can see all of it. Not too many. It looks like a lot, but it really isn't. We got the Boston Massacre as the first thing, Boston Tea Party, First Continental Congress. So we got Boston Massacre in 1770, Boston Tea Party 1773, and that's where we have Samuel Adams and Paul Revere led patriots in throwing tea into Boston Harbor to protest tea taxes. And we got the First Continental Congress. Remember, everybody but Georgia was there. And why was that? Because they were getting help from the British to fight Indians. And then we got the battles of Lexington and Concord. This is the first armed conflict of the Revolution. Is this shot heard round the world? If you got your sheet out here, write the shot heard round the world. That's in 1775. Battle of Bunker Hill was right after that. This is the first major battle of the war. And then we have the approval of the Declaration of Independence. Remember, July 4th, 1776. This is where the colonies declared independence from Great Britain. And then we have the Battle of Saratoga. This is the turning point of the war and led to the French support for the Patriot cause. That's why it's a turning point, because once we win that battle, the French finally start coming on board. Surrender at Yorktown marks the end of the revolution, and then finally, and that's in 1781. And then in 1783, we have the signing of the Treaty of Paris, where Britain finally recognizes American independence. Finally, we have the advantages that the Americans had in the Revolutionary War. Number one, we were fighting for our own land principles and beliefs. Number two, additional support from the French. And number three, strong leadership. Actually, in the book, two and three are reversed, but it doesn't matter what order it is. Just wanted to point that out. So we're fighting for our land principles and beliefs. We get support from France and strong leadership. Okay, definitely take a look over this sheets right here in the back in your workbook. They're going to help you a great deal on your test. Thanks for watching. Good luck.